this episode of Quake It Up. In this episode, I want to be looking at The Northern Lights by Philip Pullman. One of my favourite books ever, obviously been recently made into a TV series by BBC and HBO, which I would also thoroughly recommend watching. I want to be looking at, in particular, why I think, unintentionally, this book is the best non-Quaker book about Quakerism in the sci-fi and fantasy genre. So obviously the name is obviously going to be the starting point. Northern Lights. Quakerism loves the word light and everything to do with that. No, not really. There's loads of other things. Let's get into it properly. So what is it actually about the Northern Lights? In the book, we follow a character called Lyra, who lives in an alternative version of Oxford. In this version of Oxford, of the world in which Lyra lives, humans are accompanied through life by their demon, which is effectively a physical representation of their spirit. And these demons take the form of animals, and they can change a lot whilst these characters are children, but as they become adults, those forms become fixed, and so your demon is whatever animal it has fixed to when you become an adult. So we follow Lyra on her journey to fight effectively against people who are looking to separate children from their demons through a process called Indecision. And she's looking to save her friends, but she's also very interested about a theological debate which is happening at the same time around the idea of dust, which is related to the part in Genesis where it's talking about to dust thou shalt return. And people who are in power believe that dust is effectively original sin, whereas people on the other side think that it is human conscience. So loads of really big themes centered around a girl who thinks around 11 years old. And as the series develops, and it's a trilogy, loads of really deep theological topics are discussed, as well as some really endearing characters as well, and also armored polar bears. So you might be thinking, okay, what's this got to do with Quakerism at all? Is Quakerism all about armored polar bears? Well, unfortunately not. But let's start off first with talking about Philip Pullman. So Philip Pullman is an atheist. This becomes very apparent as the series carries on, but he has said in multiple interviews that I've read that he has deep respect for the Quakers, and the things he points out as to things that he admires about the Quakers are their respect for tolerance and variety of belief within their tradition, and also the lack of organization in its religion. The book fundamentally is against organized centers of power. So it looks to Quakerism perhaps as a type of religion or way of doing religion which doesn't revolve around any hierarchy. There isn't a Quaker Pope or anything like that. It's all very flat, and everyone in the community can participate at the same level. There's no paid clergy or anything like that. So what do we tackle first? I suppose let's go to this idea of dust then. So dust, as it's portrayed in the books, is the way of something beyond our understanding communicating with us. And this could be it is looked at in many different ways in the books. It's looked at it's whether it is sin, whether it is human conscience, whether it is God, and or God's will. And as a Quaker, obviously, this just gets me thinking about the inner light and that term that we use to describe our interactions with God. Dust obviously is everywhere and is permeating everywhere, and everyone is touched by it. In the same way, Quakers believe that the inner light touches everyone, despite their background, culturally or geographically, has access to God on a very intimate basis, and can communicate with Him, and can develop a relationship with Him in the same way that dust is everywhere and affects us all. In the book, I think one of the coolest things that is in the book is a device that Lyra uses throughout the series in order to listen to what the dust is telling her. Again, sounding very Quaker. Um, and that's called the alethiometer. It looks sort of like a pocket watch or a compass. The American version of the book, I think, is called The Golden Compass, relating to this alethiometer. In the book, it's explained that the alethiometer means the truth-telling device or the way of measuring truth, which again, I think that word should be getting Quakers thinking as well. We have as one of our first queries or advices listening to promptings of truth and love. So we have this device which we use in order to listen to the truth. Now, do I believe that we should have a physical device that helps us listen out to promptings of truth and love? No, I think that would be very dangerous and also kind of takes away uh, the unknowable in the relationship with God. If we have a device that helps us do it, it makes it less magical, it makes the experience less mystical, and doesn't require us to be gathering as a group in order to do that. However, I think obviously it's very beautiful and a really good way of trying to explain what Quakers are trying to do when they're listening out for the truth. We're effectively there with our alethiometers trying to listen out to the truth. With the alethiometers as well, it's said that they're best used by children because children have the ability to think in ways which adults cannot. It does really build on the idea that adults become very fixed in their worldview, in their minds, in their habits, whereas children are much more adventurous, much more willing to think about things in different ways. Um, and I think that's really very true, especially when we think about how Quakers uh, try to include young people, children into our meetings for worship. We do respect ministry from people of all ages. So people, although we do have children meetings where maybe they might not spend the whole hour in silent worship. They might go off and do they might do some tasks or something to help them understand what's going on in the meeting, but maybe in a bit more of a practical way, which is obviously better for younger minds. But they do come in and they do spend some time in meeting as well with the adults. And if they have something to say, that's something which is listened to just as much as if it were said by someone who's uh, obviously a lot older. So I think the Quaker respect for children is factored in and is shown quite clearly in this book, where Lyra is seen as someone who's able to read the truth in a way that adults cannot. It goes on to talk about the idea of negative capacity, which was, I believe that's coming from the poet Keats. And negative capacity is how you read the alethiometer. The idea that you cannot ask it actively in your mind. You cannot be thinking, tell me what the answer is or what I should do. Lyra reads the alethiometer by setting out the um, setting out the points that makes the device work, and then listening, not tr- listening for an answer, but just simply listening and being open to that experience, which is what Quaker worship is. That's precisely what we're doing. We might come very well to meeting wanting answers to a question, but if we just spend that whole hour just asking, tell me the answer, tell me the answer, tell me the answer, it's not going to come. We have to take a step back, and we have to just listen to what the promptings of love and truth are, telling us what we should do that way. Only when we remove our active questioning in that can we get an answer. Now, I don't mean by that that we should become completely passive either. We have to be working. It is a relationship. Obviously, Lyra wouldn't do very well reading the alethiometer if she just left it and didn't do anything with it once it set it on its once she set it up to find an answer to something. She needs to work with it as well, but she has to allow it and be open to what the alethiometer is telling her. So I do want to talk a little bit about, as I mentioned, the book is effectively, from Lyra's perspective at least, obviously there are loads of backstories in it, but one of Lyra's primary aims in the book is to save one of her friends who's been kidnapped by one of these groups of people who are looking to separate children from their demons through a process called indecision. And there's a scene where Lyra is herself captured and she is put up for this process. And she's put in this room where, into a cage where, and her demon into another one. And the episode is called, or the episode is also the name of an episode on the TV show, but the chapter is called The Silver Guillotine. And that's what it is. You see this a slim silver blade going down, looking to cut Lyra from her demon or from her spirit. And although obviously this is in no way part of Quaker practice in any way, but I think it does kind of show what, and I think Quakers would agree, would show when we don't listen to to the inner light, when we don't listen to what, or if we don't look to develop a relationship with the inner light, we see a child who has had this process done to them and they are completely devoid of any way of really thinking. They've become sort of robotic. All emotions been taken out of them, and all they want is they want their demon back. They want their soul back. They feel like they're missing something, and I think that's certainly maybe how I would feel with if I compare myself now as a Quaker to how I was before I started to develop this. You feel an urge for something, you feel a need for something, but you don't know what it is, and nothing can really make you feel happy in that way. You can have loads of things, or you can have loads of friends, or you can do loads of things, or whatever, but there's still something lacking, and that gnaws at you. And so I suppose this indecision is really a visual representation of that when when the divine or when that mystical experience is torn away from you, what's left of humanity when that is gone. So the book is fundamentally, as I said at the beginning, about combating organized religion, combating organizations, basically trying to hem in individuality, individual thoughts, and plurality of belief. This is very clearly seen with the character of Lord Asriel and Lyra herself, both who are characters who defy the social order, who defy what those in power tell them that they can or can't do. And it gets me thinking about the Quaker tradition of speaking truth to power, so that word truth coming back into it again. That quote originally came from Bayard Rustin, who was a an American Quaker who was campaigning in the civil rights movement and has often been overlooked, but coined this phrase, which has then been used very widely. And I think that is what Quakers try to do. They try to speak truth to power. That's why Quakers campaign so much for social justice, if that's for nuclear disarmament, fighting against war, or campaigning for peace, or fighting for a greener world. I think Quakers have always striven to speak truth to power, to say when those who are in power are doing things wrong, and to fight in a non-violent way for the betterment of the world. And I think that is sort of what the characters of Lord Asriel and Lyra are trying to do. They are combating against this idea where there's no truth but what the people in power say that it is, and everyone else has to believe them. There can be no plurality, and there can be no resistance. So, is the Northern Lights and the whole series actually a Quaker book? Clearly not. There are loads of not very Quakerly messages in that book. For one thing, especially Lyra's world is very violent. There is one where, and she is quite keen to participate in violence as well, which obviously doesn't fit into the Quaker testimony of peace. She actively wants to fight actively uh, against injustices. She's also gains a reputation for being a liar, or using lies cunningly in order to get what she wants or to help her friends and things like that. And whilst, you could argue maybe in that situation it was okay to lie, again, doesn't necessarily fit very well with the Quaker testimony towards truth. And by the end of the whole series, I would say the last part of me which makes me think this isn't necessarily a good Quaker book is that the atheist background of the author really comes out. And whilst that's fine insofar as that there are atheist Quakers as well, I think it might not sit well with the majority of Quakers in the world. And I understand why the author did it, and I think I think it works very well with the storyline of what they're trying to say. But I think there are certain elements towards the end of the series and its relationship with God which not all Quakers would agree with. So overall, then, I think there are loads of really quite deep things that are being discussed, especially considering that Northern Lights is primarily aimed at children. I think it's a great way to start getting kids thinking about theology, and also to getting them start thinking about certain elements of Quaker theology through the idea of dust as the inner light, the alethiometer as a way of listening to the light, and also the negative capacity model as a way of doing Quaker worship. I think there's loads of really good things to take from that as a Quaker. But obviously take it with a pinch of salt. There aren't yet any armoured polar bears in Quakerism yet. Thank you very much for watching this video. If you liked it, please do click on the thumbs up button, and do check out some of my other videos about Quakerism in the UK. If you want to keep up to date with the latest videos, please do remember to subscribe as well. It really helps. Thank you.